What if you peered into the future and witnessed your destiny, but didn't like what you saw? Would you accept it? Or would you try to escape? Work around the edges of prophecy and escape an uncomfortable fate? This is the central question of The Edge of Fate. A character sees how they will die far before it happens, and has to answer the question I just asked you. They choose the active path, the path of anyone with the evolutionary drive to survive, to prefer existence to non-existence. They try to scheme against fate, and in turn, protect the people they love from the horrible consequences of their untimely end. They are fated to die, and cannot prevent that outcome, but try to reduce the impact on everyone around them. They try to prevent the apocalypse.
My role may be set, but I will not play it passively. I will move time and space to hold them accountable, and I will enact my future on my own terms.
There was an apocalypse and its ancient history,
and I can't undo any of it.
If they won't save us, then we'll just have to save ourselves. We've got something more reliable than a god. Guardian, my faith lies with you.
I just had the craziest idea I've ever had in my life.
You got us here, Guardian. Now get us the answers we deserve.
This is part 2 of Conspiracy, my series examining the Nine. If you want the best viewing experience, I would recommend watching part 1 first. It covers the nature of the Nine and their actions during the Light and Darkness saga. The Edge of Fate begins with an invitation and ends with a message. The Guardian, Ikora Rey, Orin, the Drifter, and Lodi find themselves summoned beyond the heliopause to a planetoid called Kepler in the far reaches of the Oort cloud. Gradually they learn they've been summoned to receive a message from a single member of the Nine.
Ikora, the Nine invited us here. It was 3.
3's message is the central driving force behind the Edge of Fate's plot. As the story progresses, information about 3's intentions is gradually revealed to the audience until the climax, where their entire plan comes into focus. These 5 guests are pawns placed by 3, who has engineered their pasts in order to ensure they're in position to receive the message. It's a cunning gambit that serves as the opening moves of a chess game that hasn't yet concluded, a conspiracy that will drive the Fate saga.
So we're just swept up in the tides of a grand cosmic plan?
No. Placed. With intention. I, to mentor the new emissary. Drifter's been used for years. The Guardian, something yet to be. And you, Ikora, arranged to hear the message you were promised.
I don't plan on being a sacrificial lamb for the Nine. Our destiny isn't up to some unknowable architect. It's ours.
The main theme of The Edge of Fate is the last word of its name, fate. From the Vault of Glass, destiny has concerned itself with fate. Paracausal forces like light and darkness are used by guardians to make their own fate and change the destiny of the universe. The Edge of Fate's name begs a question. What is the Edge of Fate? What limits does prophecy have in a universe with godlike beings, able to manipulate and even break the laws of physics for their own ends? The expansion doesn't provide a complete answer, as this question seems to be the central theme of the saga it serves as the opening chapter to, but it does give some indication of the direction things are headed thematically. We are left questioning these ideas like Ikora. Does free will exist, or is it an illusion? Are we able to choose our own fate when we are manipulated by cosmic forces and eldritch gods beyond our comprehension? Does time travel bind us to one prophetic outcome, or are we able to break free by making different choices? The conspiracy revealed during the Edge of Fate's story shows just how deep the Nine's intervention goes, and changes our perception of established history. Due to their non-linear relationship with time, for 3 this story happens in reverse. 3 is born knowing how they will die, and spends their entire life trying to engineer a set of events that will lessen the impact of their untimely end.
The message is clear. I understand what was forgotten. 3 is dead.
The Nine that invited us here is dead? They brought us here to tell us something. They rearranged our entire lives For what?
There has to be a reason.
The edge of fate is running towards 3's fated death. The entire theme of fate hinges on this. What would you do if you knew the exact time, location, and method in which you would die, but you couldn't change the outcome? How would you work around the edges of your fate? Many of your first thoughts pondering this question likely jump towards preparation, saying goodbye to your loved ones, making sure anyone who depends on you would be cared for, preparing a funeral ahead of time without them knowing. All decisions that would lessen the impact on people you care about. This is what 3 is doing in the Edge of Fate. It sees humanity as its children, their cherished little motes, seeding their cognition that they try to protect in return. If 3 is as old as Earth, they would have seen life arise upon it, forged in the crucible of Earth nearly 4 billion years ago. They then would have watched those tiny single-celled organisms proliferate, producing oxygen that changed the atmospheric composition of Earth to be more suitable for those organisms. That life slowly took over the planet, becoming multicellular, and then filling Earth with a huge diversity of animals in the Cambrian explosion. As life grew bigger and exerted more influence on Earth, it in turn would have exerted more influence on 3, the mass shadows growing in number and size. Eventually that life would develop civilization and technology, accelerating until the arrival of the Traveler. 3 likely views Earth's life as its children because it watched them grow over 4 billion years, nurtured by 3 and their Earth. That life finally being able to interact with 3 would be like finally seeing a child become an adult, with their own interests, ideas, and opinions, taking flight as they leave the nest to become their own person. This relationship with humanity is why 3 enacts their conspiracy. They want their children to continue living after they're gone, so they try to engineer an outcome where humanity has the tools they need to survive, without their godparent watching over them. In Anamorphosis, 3 reflects upon Thea's death, clearly thinking about their own future demise, foreshadowing the Edge of Fate. By regaling the story of Thea, the 9 reveal that it's possible for a being like the 9 to die. 3 reflects upon this, saying, "The curse of our existence. Past is present is future. Pain never to fade into memory." Can you imagine? They are experiencing their death while trying to explain Thea's to the emissary, and by proxy the audience. The specter of death hanging over each member of the 9 helps explain their motivations and manipulations. The following entry of Anamorphosis, Theomachia, elucidates this fact. 4 says, "Death." 9 replies, "One need only look to Thea." 1 says, "What is there to be done about it?" 5 replies, "Escape." 4 says, "Transformation." 9 replies, "Immortality." 7 replies, "Unbind reality." 3 interjects, "It is not their fault." 2 responds, "Yet the consequences are ours, are theirs." 6 interjects, "Offensive pity for wretched empty-headed jailers rejected." 1 replies, "Until interdependence is severed, what is good for them is good for us." 8 says, "Cooperation equals considered equals refused." 9 states, "Then we 9 are divided." Theomachia is a Greek word for a battle among the gods. The battle in this entry is the same divide that has existed since the arrival of the Traveler, the inner and outer factions. The 9 are so ideologically divided that they cannot even agree about what to do in the face of their own mortality. The inner orbits want to transform themselves, while the outer orbits want to escape into a world of their own creation. You'd think that experiencing their death constantly for their entire lives would make them more cooperative, but it doesn't. Both sides are complacent, too focused on being right about the method than avoiding their fates. 3 is the only one who seems to get it. They don't blame their children for their existence. The life of the Sol system never asked to be jailers of incomprehensible gods, dependent on their existence to survive. The 9 were born before that life had sentience, had the potential to even understand a concept like free will. 6's perspective is equivalent to calling a newborn baby your jailer, because you can't go out partying and need to stay home and care for them. That baby didn't ask to be born, and didn't set the conditions of their reality. Their parents did. 3 seems to have come to accept their fate, accept the impending death that will change everything. Still, they are afraid. Three's death comes at the hand of Maya Sundaresh, the conductor. The invited guests realize her motivation just before discovering Three is already dead.
The Vex and the Singularity. Maya's goal has always been to return to the Golden Age. But a black hole won't get her there.
But maybe a member of the Nine could. She came to make a deal with Three. Trade the current age for the Golden Age?
A trade like that wouldn't be possible. The Nine can bring anything forward in time, but nothing ever goes backward. Three would have told her as much.
Maya's echo means no isn't an answer.
This sounds like it isn't about simple refusal, though. It's a matter of physical impossibility.
When Maya spoke to us in the Gorge, she said she did what she came here to do. But we're not back in the Golden Age. What did she try to do?
The echo can compel, but it cannot force the impossible.
The conductor is a twist on the idea of compelling others to obey your will. Her echo of command allows her to control other sentient beings, forcing them to obey her every desire. It wouldn't be interesting if she could just use it to control everyone and get everything she wants. So the writers create a paradox. What if you had the power to control other people's actions, but the one thing you actually wanted, your driving motivation and goal, was fundamentally impossible? The conductor as a character is bound by fate and blinded by grief. She never got over the collapse, watching humanity lose everything, an apocalyptic trauma. However, this iteration of Maya is not willing to accept reality and learn to cope with loss. Instead, it drives her to do horrible things, becoming obsessed with unethical research, willing to do anything in service of a new golden age, to hurt other people and use them against themselves, to use her paracausal echo to compel the Vex to do her bidding, and kill all other simulated copies of herself and her research team. This destroys the one good thing Maya has left, her relationship with Chioma, her wife. The conductor is so focused on what she's lost that she doesn't see what she has until it's gone. Then her wife becomes part of her motivation too, to create her personal golden age, to resurrect a broken marriage by turning back the clock to when times were better. The problem is that there's no version of Chioma that would be okay with who the conductor is, and the conductor cannot accept that. Her characterization in episode Echoes and the Edge of Fate is all about grief and fate. She cannot accept that the past is history and cannot be changed. The narrative motivation for Chronal Flow is then revealed as being in service of this theme, that obsessing over your past and refusing to accept that to live with it is your fate can cause greater pain and suffering in the future. When the conductor travels to Kepler in search of Three, she's searching for a new way to rewind the clock and fix her past. Three is unable to help. Three's guests discover the means to temporarily reawaken Three in order to receive the message.
You stand here, that I would not die alone again.
If you cannot give me what I want, what can you do?
Still I die afraid, at your sister's command.
You are a being who bends all rules. Why do you fear breaking this one?
A death ensures extinction. Listen carefully, children of my earth. To survive, you must bind the Nine. It cannot be done. The weapon will do it. Strike true, weapon. Goodbye, Ambassador. Goodbye, Commander.
Come, coward.
Three said their death starts a chain reaction that leads to extinction. But if they went through all the trouble to get us here, to send a message to the children of their Earth,
Then it must be a warning, not a promise. Three gave us instructions to prevent extinction.
Bind the 9. A dying wish to save us.
3 dies because the conductor tries to force them to obey an impossible command. It's like telling someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You can't lift yourself off the ground by pulling on your shoes. If you don't believe me, go try it. You won't be able to and will likely fall over instead. This is the catch-22 the conductor finds herself in. She has the ability to compel anyone to do her bidding, but the one thing she actually wants is impossible. It's clever theming and teaches an important lesson about grief. You can't force or command your way out of it. Eventually, you will have to accept that the past cannot be changed. It's horrifying to kill someone this way, forcing them to obey contradictory or impossible commands, and then punishing them with a violent end for resisting or not complying. 3's fear of breaking the rule of chronal flow is not actually a fear of the rules. It's a fear caused by the knowledge of what comes next. An agonizing death that pulls 3 out of their natural dark matter state, creating a black hole surrounded by impossible traditional matter, formed from the paracausal destruction of dark matter. 3 knows it's coming, has always known it will end this way, and yet they are still afraid when the moment comes, even after engineering their cosmic conspiracy to mitigate the outcome. Their fear is a very vulnerable and human emotion for an incomprehensible alien god. 3's Gambit is in service of 2 things. The first is to have their children present, able to witness their death in retrospect, so that they feel comforted and do not have to die alone. The second is to deliver a prophecy of great loss, a warning. If countermeasures are not taken, 3's death will cause the extinction of life in the Sol system. 3 wants to protect their children from this fate by giving them the means to save themselves. This Gambit in the Edge of Fate is in service of setting up the pieces, pawns to be used in service of a game that continues after the chess master dies. A game where the opponents are 3's siblings, the 9. The Guardian's purpose as a weapon is then revealed as doing the impossible, to change the fate of Sol by binding the 9. The saga has not concluded, so we don't know if fate can be changed, but the implication is that it can be. The Guardian is asked to be a weapon that changes the fate of the universe, like they have with the Witness. What appeared to be checkmate in a game the Inner Orbits played against the Witness was really the opening moves in 3's Gambit, a second game where the stakes are extinction yet again. On a metatextual level, we can look back to Destiny 1 and the music of the Spheres, the symphony created by Martin O'Donnell, Michael Salvatore, and Paul McCartney. Yes, that Paul McCartney. It features 8 songs, one for each of the celestial bodies known since antiquity: the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. It concludes with a final song representing Earth and the Traveler. Each song title represents that body. The lore for each member of the 9 in the Edge of Fate seems to play on the ideas from music of the Spheres to some degree. The song for Earth is titled The Hope and is the only song with lyrics, the second half being Hope for the Future by Paul McCartney. Metaphorically, 3's death represents the death of hope in the Sol system, which threatens extinction just like the potential death of the Traveler threatened extinction. It's hard to keep living if you don't have hope. Hope, to some degree, is the motivation that drives us to keep getting up each day, keep trying, keep working towards our goals. Without it, we all would be lost. The Vidoc for Renegades also stated that hope will be a running theme in the next expansion. Hope has been a central theme, a through line since Destiny 1 all the way to the present of Destiny's story. As McCartney sings in Hope for the Future, the hope that the days ahead will be the best of all. Now that we know 3's motivation, we can look back at the Edge of Fate with knowledge and see the intent and purpose behind each move they make to change the fate of their 5 intended pawns. Each pawn has a unique purpose. Prior to the Edge of Fate, the 9 have the emissary send a message to humanity and the Guardian in Rite of the 9.
We ask Make known your value, so divided gods may wield you in time.
This outreach serves as a prologue to the Edge of Fate in 3's Gambit. Meanwhile, 2 and 7 try to impress their existence upon the emissary, and tell Orin the purpose of their conspiracies in Anamorphosis. 2 says, "Imagine, know, your breath, your dreams, your poetry are not yours alone. Were they ever?" 7 says, "Neurons firing before conscious thought, churning gut bacteria, serotonin puppeteers. We exist at the whim of mindless chemistry." 2 says, "We are nothing, nothing like you, save in this." 7 says, "Autonomy is denied us." 2 says, "Waking, knowing, always, are limitations. We seek only freedom." What about my freedom? 7 says, "Silence plus cessation." Ha, ha, ha. 2 says, "Curious, this predestiny can still surprise. You raise your boron, let your brains flatten. Yes, this was a surprise to you, too." 7 says, "What are you planning? Don't you already know?" In Greek legends, Mekone is the place where fire was hidden from humanity by Zeus, after actions by Prometheus to trick Zeus. Prometheus steals fire back for humanity. This title is drawing parallels between Prometheus and Orin. In this analogy, Orin is stealing humanity's fate from the gods, the Nine. This gives us a very big hint at how the themes of the Fate Saga will resolve themselves. The Fate Saga will likely be about humanity stealing fate and breaking free from the Nine's conspiracies by binding them. 2 and 7's words paint the Nine as hypocrites. They create elaborate conspiracies and manipulate humanity because they see themselves as not independent, not able to create their own fate. In trying to escape their fate, they're placing Soul's life in the exact same situation. You could view this as the Nine perpetuating a tragic cycle, binding humanity to fate in the same way the Nine are bound to fate. Alternatively, you could interpret this as everyone already being bound to fate, and the Nine are just playing the game, using the pieces available to them to work within the confines of destiny, making humanity collateral damage, pieces sacrificed to allow the Nine to escape fate. Orin understands the irony of this and points it out, which surprises 2 and 7. It's interesting that they're even capable of experiencing surprise, because they already should know the outcome, having experienced it from birth. This either hints at the possibility of changing fate, or shows that the Nine don't perceive all of the finer details of time, instead seeing major inflection points rather than every moment. Either one would allow for interesting exploration of destiny. Anamorphosis concludes with Orin's final attempt to break free from the Nine, allowing her to reflect upon her time as emissary. It reads, "They expected a mouthpiece, dutifully repeating after them, but they needed a true translator, and in translation, there is always a personal flourish, just enough for you to keep a foothold. You have lost so many things, so many people, so many selves. You will lose more before you are done, but you still have your gift. You are rebuilding yourself one atom at a time. It is slow work, but one day you will be done, and this endless eternity will compress into a moment in your past. Your gift will end wars. It's time for you to use it." The title katasterismos is a term for being turned into a star in Greek mythology. Like many ancient cultures, the Greeks mythologized the stars, creating elaborate stories explaining the origins of various stars and constellations, as living people turned into stars. The title draws a parallel between the role of emissary in these legends. The Nine take a person they deem worthy and transmute them from a human into a star, their will given up in service of the gods, transcending their humanity to understand the Nine. Orin is reversing this process, returning from star stuff to a human form, where her will is her own. The first line hints at Orin's purpose in the Edge of Fate. As an emissary, she was a translator, interpreting the Nine's words and converting them to human language. Translation is an art, which allows meaning to be altered in order to put it in a new context. It's pretty common in movies or TV to see a translator bend the words and meaning of those they are translating for, or even flat out lie about what was said in order to keep the peace between both parties. This is often mined for comedic effect. This kind of bending of translation is what Orin would have done, but not likely to the degree of lying. Orin retained a degree of will by putting a hand on the scale, carving out a space for herself between the translation of God thoughts to human speech. The Nine didn't like this. They wanted a faithful translator, not someone who would alter the meaning slightly to be better received by humanity. This is what they seek in their next emissary. Orin leaving the role allows her to mentor her replacement. Lodi is a linguist by trade, making him perfectly suited to the role of emissary, perhaps even more so than Orin. The Nine believe he will be a true mouthpiece like Orin never was. Orin's gift is not translation, it's another skill, mediation. Her gift can end wars, meaning she's adept at bringing two sides to compromise and preventing conflict. The implication is that her role in 3's Gambit is to reduce conflict between all parties and better ensure everyone will agree with their role. Even when Orin tries to get someone to not obey the will of the Nine, she ironically makes them more likely to do it. We see this with Lodi. Catastrophic ends immediately before the start of the Edge of Fate. As evidence for this, in the opening cutscene, Orin breaks free from the Nine's will, ceasing to be their emissary, and instead becoming herself again. She does this to send a warning to humanity. However, the adjustment from the Nine's nonlinear relationship with time scrambles her memory.
I meant to deliver a message, but can't remember what it is. I know the Nine will need a replacement emissary. They will not find one nearby on the X-axis. They will need to search a millennia up and down the Y.
Breaking free from the Nine is likely an act of free will on Orin's part, given her statement that her will is her own. This complicates the Nine's plans, forcing the Inners to need a replacement emissary to communicate on their behalf. Then, Orin's purpose on Kepler from the Nine's perspective is to help the Vanguard understand the Nine, allowing their actions to be influenced in service of 3's goals, while also mentoring the replacement emissary. The Nine search the timeline to find a new emissary and find one in Lodi.
My people and I discovered a signal in deep space which connected to an object we found under our city. It brought me here, all the way from the space age before the collapse. I'm from the past.
The Nine pull Lodi from Earth in the 1960s to hundreds of years in the future to after the Witness's defeat. All they need to facilitate this is a strange artifact and a phone call with the ability to transport someone across time and space. Lodi is the perfect candidate because he's a linguist, with a knack for quickly learning foreign languages. In the Edge of Fate, he quickly facilitates a relationship between the Nine's guest and the inhabitants of Kepler, the Aeonians. This shows that he's good at playing envoy or emissary, translating the needs and requests of two very different sides, and creating a mutually beneficial outcome. This is the perfect skill set needed for someone to mediate disagreements between two factions of eldritch gods, and also relay their messages to organisms made of traditional matter. Initially, Lodi lies to everyone about his true origins, claiming he woke up on Kepler in a singed suit and doesn't remember his past. However, once he learns about the collapse, and that humanity doesn't have an exact date for it, he has the world's most justified crash out, worrying that his family, his brother, sister-in-law, and their children died horrible deaths in the apocalypse. This crash out ends the deception, leading him to reveal that he worked for the Department of External Observation during the Space Age, an organization dedicated to facilitating first contact with aliens. What nobody's able to tell him is that his family likely lived lived long lives, given that the Golden Age doesn't start until the 21st century and lasts for centuries, meaning his family would have likely died during the Golden Age of Old Age, even given that human lifespan triples in the Golden Age. Tragically, as far as I'm aware, this good news never reaches him because nobody alive knows. Upon meeting Orin, Lodi asks her about his predicament.
Miss Orin, do you know something about who brought me here?
I know you will be elected to become something impossible. Your molecules have already volunteered. I was the emissary as you are, and will become the same. I quit, and it left me transmuted. I think if I can help you adjust, I can reclaim my mind.
Orin's goals are aligned with the Nine. She wants to help Lodi become the emissary so that she can return to her former life. Orin feels conflicted about this, because losing your agency and becoming the errand boy of eldritch gods is not a good fate. They treated Orin like a plaything, disregarding her agency and humanity. Lodi will share the same fate if he becomes emissary. Gradually, Lodi comes to accept that he cannot go back to the past, and must leave his former life behind to help prevent another apocalypse, so he agrees to serve the Nine, seeing it as his way to help humanity. The Guardian, Ikora, and Drifter are drawn to Kepler after they receive a signal from deep space, and witness a Golden Age train crash in the EDZ. The signal leads them to Kepler, where they discover a singularity at the center of the planetoid that threatens to destabilize the orbits of Sol if it consumes the surrounding matter that makes up Kepler. In the Edge of Fate, all 5 invited guests work with the Ionians to stabilize the singularity enough to travel close to it and receive a message from 3. The 9 eventually reveal that Ikora knew Lodi in the past and was murdered by 3 in order to ensure her resurrection as a guardian.
2 speaks on behalf of 3 that you might grasp your necessary presence at this point in space, in time. Commander, your first step, scheduled at our hand, an intervention necessary to ensure attendance.
The 9 killed me to get me here?
From simple perspectives, the technicality, emissary, reveal your truth.
When it feels like my world is falling, I hope and I pray that soon as I hang my head in shame,
How long did you know?
From the second I saw you.
Why didn't you tell me?
Because you're not her! I figured the 9 put you here to torture me. The one face I'd recognize. And she had no idea who I was.
Lodi, did the 9 kill me just to ensure I would end up here?
Yes. Maybe your body had to be in the right place for your ghost to find you.
I woke up by a car in the desert with a flower in my hand. Ophiuchus chose me as his guardian, and every choice I made led me here.
Catastrophic intervention.
3 stole Ikora's first life just as they stole Lodi's, forcing her to become a guardian so that she would eventually make the choices that would lead her to Kepler. 3's method is not subtle here. They manipulate Ikora by giving her bad news about her family, and then teleport a train onto the road where she's driving home, causing a fatal collision. Apparently, Ikora isn't even buried, left to rot in the wreckage of her car until Ophiuchus resurrects her, hundreds of years later during the Dark Age. This intervention shows a dark side of the 9. They're willing to make other people suffer, even those they consider their children, in order to create the necessary conditions for their conspiracies to succeed. They have very little regard for the suffering they cause, as long as they get their intended outcome. Humans are like bugs to the 9, squashed if they get in the way. 3 and other members of the 9 also call Ikora commander, implying that she will eventually take Zavala's position as Vanguard commander. It's unclear if this is because he will die, or if it's because he simply decides to retire because he's aging and no longer wields the light after the loss of his ghost. I'm guessing Zavala will be an important character in Renegades, given that it takes place on Mars and involves the Cabal, so perhaps something happens there that either causes him to die or quit. It's an ominous regime change, as Zavala has served as Vanguard commander since Osiris was exiled from the city, meaning he's been leading the Vanguard for decades. A change in leadership would have huge implications for humanity and the Last City. If Zavala dies, then the Vanguard must reckon with the question of who will replace him as Titan Vanguard. It took 6 years for Cade to be replaced, so it may take a while. While 3 invites Ikora to receive the message on behalf of humanity, they have a different purpose for the Guardian. The Guardian is a fated weapon that the 9 will use to kill whoever needs killing in order to serve their agenda. This is how the Guardian has been used by the Vanguard and other agents in the past. In a way, the 9 have been using the Guardian like this since Destiny 1, by selling them weapons via Zur, then observing their use of them in the field to see the Guardian wield paracausal forces. They even do this in Rite of the 9, having the Guardian kill various enemies in exchange for rewards, to prove that they are useful enough to serve as the 9's weapon in the Edge of Fate. In Quarantine, 9 delivers a message for the Guardian explaining their role.
I do have a message for the weapon to be. Guardian, we knew salt water would evaporate. Missiles aiming at solar flares would collide. Humanity was destined to burn. 3 and I, well, we looked at the Valley of Unknown Space. We saw our nature would nurture the conditions for uppercase light. Your resurrection was enabled by our hand for this purpose. Your action will end the looming horizon. For this you were positioned, set into orbit. This and 3's message to come.
Wait, so the 9 are saying they planned for me to raise the Guardian?
We are not pawns. We determine our choices, not them.
3 and 9 are implied to have seeded the conditions for the Traveler to arrive in Sol and bless humanity with the light. 9 says that even if humanity had not received the light, they would have suffered an apocalypse anyways, likely at our own hands instead of the Black Fleet, whether that be nuclear war or human-caused climate change. Alternatively, the implication could be that if the Traveler didn't come to Sol, humanity would have died when the Witness enacted the final shape. The Traveler's arrival was apparently orchestrated by 9 and 3 to allow for the Guardian to be resurrected in order to eventually become the 9's fated weapon. This connects quite well to lore about the Traveler's arrival back from the Grimoire cards of Destiny 1. The Ghost Fragment for Earth shows the Traveler's feelings when it discovers humanity. It reads, "The blaze sits inside a nest of little worlds, still too distant to share its heat but plainly staring out at you. A face emerges, drawn from plasmas and radiation. There must be meanings in its roar. You listen hard and carefully, and sometimes a lucid melody seems to rise out of random noise. Joy builds, and the first hope in ages transforms you. It seems important, even critical, to tell every star from here to the black between galaxies that you will be strong again." The discovery of humanity causes the Traveler to have hope for the future, for the first time in a while after being chased from every world by the Black Fleet's attack, believing it will find new strength from humanity. Eventually, the Traveler chooses humanity to make a stand against the Black Fleet with. This narrative continues in the second Ghost Fragment for the Traveler. It reads, "This has been such a long chase. This will be the place you fight and win. But do you really know why you go where you go, and where this journey is taking you? The chase leads you to where you need to be, you believe, unless you are being pushed." This sense of the Traveler being pushed by outside forces was likely intended to be about the darkness and the Black Fleet, given that the first Ghost Fragment for the Traveler is about the knife, which is later revealed as the Witness. However, the Edge of Fate layers a second meaning on top of this. The Traveler is also being pushed to soul by the Nine, who want its paracausal light for their conspiracies. The Guardian isn't the weapon yet when 9 reveals this, but prior to approaching the Singularity and receiving 3's message, the 9 vote on electing Lodi Emissary and the Guardian weapon.
I feel like the L train during rush hour. All of them are queuing up in here. The 9 need us.
The vote. Of course they want to do it now. I remember my own transfer. There wasn't much fanfare. So it was miscreated. They seemed eager to move on.
The vote takes place shortly afterwards.
This council sees the weapon loosed, but stands unmoved to ratify an emissary. 8 votes cast. 1 remains. It is required. Weapon, you are charged with seeking the final vote. 3.
The Inners, aside from 3, vote as a block to approve both weapon and emissary. The Outers all vote against the emissary, but 7 and 8 vote for the weapon. With a majority of 6, the weapon is approved, but the 8 living members of the 9 are split on the emissary. This leaves Lodi's fate to a draw. The 9 ask the Guardian to get 3's vote, but 3 never casts one. This is quite strange because the 9 should be able to see the future and know that 3 is dead, unless for some reason they don't believe this fact. 3's message is focused on the cause of their death and the prophecy to avert extinction, not whether or not they think Lodi should be emissary. This leaves the 9 as a hung jury. They are 8, split 4-4 between inner and outer orbits, deadlocked in a game that will forever come to a draw unless someone breaks ranks and crosses sides. The Inners can no longer force their agenda by holding a majority. What this means for the future is uncertain, but I believe that the 9 will be unable to make major decisions until another member falls, or someone has a change of heart. What will happen next is uncertain. Theogonia from Anamorphosis gives us additional insight into 3's plans via another conversation between the emissary and the 9. Theogonia is a romanization of the title of a poem by ancient Greek poet Hesiod, which tells the story of the origins of the Greek gods. This conversation is about the 9's origins and mostly contains the 9 describing their existence in poetic terms. We've already covered most of that, so I've only included portions that hint about the future. 3 says, "Hush now, little one, gather the vestment of my breath, drink the wine of my blood." 9 says, "Don't come too close, or you'll burn your little wings." 3 says, "Fashion the blade of my bone. Now bury the killers of my children, my beloved, my kindred, me." You don't want to kill anyone. You want to protect them. You want to build bridges. Isn't that why you're here? 3's message is pretty obvious after the Edge of Fate. They're telling Orin to deliver a message to humanity. The first line evokes Catholic beliefs about the sacrament of Eucharist, where they believe they are eating the body and drinking the blood of Jesus Christ. There's a Bible passage that's based on. The writers are drawing parallels between 3 and Jesus Christ, foreshadowing that 3 will die a martyr like Jesus, a fallen god, sacrificed for the survival of humanity. Again, Catholic interpretation here. I was raised Catholic. Drinking 3's blood and gathering the vestment of their breath is a command for humanity to use the remnants of their body after their death. The parallels to the Eucharist would then imply that 3 will somehow empower humanity, cleansing or purifying their human children via a kind of communion after death. I'm not sure what this would look like, but it definitely gives us a thematic picture of what the impacts of 3's death will be. It could be a hint that binding the 9 will require use of the Singularity and 3's body. You could also make some theories based on the Jesus parallels, that there will be a kind of second coming of 3 that brings apocalypse, like the Book of Revelation. 9 gives humanity, or perhaps Orin, a warning, referencing Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and had his wings of feathers and wax melted. I interpret this as reiterating the 9's power. It will take a lot to bind them, and if anyone, including the weapon, comes too close too early, they will be melted like Icarus's wings. 3's second line makes the message more explicit. The blade of their bone already implies 3 will die and is requesting their corpse be used as a weapon against their killers, and the killers of their children. We don't know who the potential killer of humanity will be yet, but we do know who 3's killer is, the conductor. 3 is saying that their corpse will empower the weapon to kill the conductor and protect humanity. I have a theory that the other members of the 9 are ultimately the beings whose actions will threaten the survival of humanity, particularly the outer orbits, which would tie into the idea that 3's bodies will be used to bind the 9. Orin responds that she doesn't want to kill anyone, presumably not understanding that 3's message isn't for her and is likely for the weapon instead. Theogonia continues. 8 says, 1 appointed emissary equals 9's will delivered. 1 says, should you desire more, you must dare to take it. 5 says, do not resist. 6 says, we will not be dethroned. 7 says, irreconcilable strength plus foolish struggle. Xenon fills your lungs. Your mouth cracks in a smile. Your vocal cords vibrate. Your words, not theirs. We'll see about that. This exchange is interesting. Anamorphosis and Rite of the 9 is all about Orin's struggle for freedom that will eventually lead her to molt back into herself, concluding her time as the emissary. 1 almost seems to be encouraging Orin to resist, likely knowing that she will break free, which is necessary for 3's Gambit. The Outers rebuke this idea, telling Orin to stop resisting and submit to their will. 6 even says that the 9 will not be dethroned, which is likely a reference to binding the 9. The 9 all have a non-linear relationship with time, so know what is going to happen before Orin does. The Outers are trying to tell Orin that her struggle is for naught, almost trying to stop the inevitable. Nevertheless, Orin persists, telling the Outers that she thinks they're wrong. This is foreshadowing the conflict between humanity and the 9 that I believe will take center stage as the main conflict of the Fate saga. Drifter's purpose is the most straightforward. His role is to wake the dead, temporarily resurrect 3 so that they can deliver their message. He finally finds out the purpose of all those banked motes and the purpose of Gambit. The Hall is a paracausal object that's bigger on the inside, containing matter from unknown space, charged by millions of motes of light and darkness. It contains the necessary magic to wake the dead, giving 3 a few moments to deliver their message.
I just had the craziest idea I've ever had in my life. What if we can wake it up? What if that's what the Hall is for? Play the game. I spent years filling it with energy. The Hall knows what it was made for.
3 intervened, so Drifter would bring the means to revive them. Brought Lodi to give them a voice. Summoned the weapon and myself so we would hear their message.
Not running from this one, as much as I'd like to. Not every day you resurrect a god.
Drifter flies the derelict close enough to the singularity to drop the Hall and is aged rapidly, even though Guardians can't normally age. 3's magic creates some strange outcomes. The first is a causal mystery.
It's back. The Hall is back, like it never left. Take a good hard look. 9 touched. They won't let me go. We eat our hearts out trying to help, but things always get worse. That's fate. Long life just means you get a good view of the carnage,
Once something crosses the event horizon of a black hole, it should never be seen again, and yet the Hall returns, violating general relativity. This implies something very strange and paracausal is occurring. Perhaps the Hall will be needed a second time for a similar or different purpose. This could be that second coming of 3 that I mentioned earlier. Drifter's reaction is nihilistic. He sees the Hall's return as proof that he's caught in the Nine's trap, forced to continue living on their terms, waiting for whenever they need him next. Drifter believes he's destined to witness the carnage wrought by the Nine's plans. This foreshadows his role in Renegades, where we now know he will be captured by the Baron's Imperium and frozen, prompting the expansion to be about rescuing him. This doesn't provide a direct connection to the Nine, but we know that the Baron's Imperium wants Drifter because of his connection to the Nine, as they're specifically searching for his ship, the Derelict, likely because it has dragged the Hall for the better part of a decade. We've already discussed the Guardian's role, but it needs to be expanded upon. The Guardian acts as the weapon to kill the Archon, so they and Ikora can receive 3's message. But this isn't the totality of their purpose. They have a much larger role that hasn't been fulfilled yet. They are the weapon who will bind the Nine. 2 also says something that gives us a hint of events that may be closer on the horizon.
Viper, to you we say, vengeance required. The culprit lies within.
You could interpret the culprit referring to the Archon, as they are who we confront just beyond the singularity, but the Archon is not responsible for 3's death. Vengeance upon the Nine's behalf is not necessary, as the Archon hasn't done anything to rise to that level. Instead, he's a useful henchman to interfere with 3's plans. As we learn at the singularity inside the core of Kepler, the real culprit is the Conductor. She killed 3, and the Inners have every reason to want her death. Real vengeance for the Nine would involve killing the Conductor. I think the weapon's primary purpose for the Nine, at least in the short term, is to find and kill the Conductor, probably during the upcoming expansion, the Alchemist. I think the titular alchemist for that expansion is the Conductor, because the imminent makes a reference to alchemy. My heart, my happiness, my life, all locked away in another time. They could be mine again if I can make a trade. An age for an age. Lead for gold. The alchemist's unrealized dream. The metaphor of alchemy represents Maya's desire to do the impossible, trade an age of iron into an age of gold, and bring back the wife she's lost. She wants to bend reality and reverse time, bringing back the golden age and fixing what she's lost. The Conductor is gambling the lives of everyone in Seoul on her delusions that she will be able to do the impossible, become an alchemist and bring forth the golden age. We've already seen the consequences of this gamble, death and extinction. Even if she's successful, the lives of everyone currently alive in Seoul will be destabilized. They will come from a history that no longer exists, casualties in service of Maya's selfish desire to turn back the clock. It's reminiscent of the undoing of Thanos' snap in Avengers Endgame, which causes everyone who perished to return, but causes chaos as the world has moved on, and now they need to find a new place in it. Maya's new golden age would be the reverse of this situation, where people from the future are sent back to the past and have to make new lives in the golden age. The only questions now are how close the Conductor will come to her goals, and whether or not the Guardian can change fate. With the death of 3 and the stalemate in the 9, the 2 factions are at a draw. This only intensifies the rift, causing the factions to conspire against each other. The 9's words then serve as our best hint towards the goals of the Inners and Outers, their conflicting conspiracies that will influence the future and the Fate saga. Epochs and Orbits contains messages from all 8 remaining members of the 9, which help us understand their perspective and plans for the future. We begin with the inner orbits. 9 says, "We are a part of you, as much as you of us, predating your wrinkled gardener, caught in the middle with you, an interconnected system that shares one fear, one dream, freedom and death, ability to choose, one's orbit, one's ties, one's fate. 9 see the grave on level plane beside our birth, experienced eternally, breeding fear. 9 expands upon 3's death. The 9 exist in a kind of eternal purgatory, a space where they see their birth and death simultaneously, one foot in the cradle while the other is in the grave. Their relationship with time forces a long-viewed perspective of history, where they witness the connections between each inhabitant of Soul as a giant cosmic web of causal relationships. In spite of existing in a parallel ecosystem to matter, 9 sees itself as intrinsically connected to the sun, which gives life to every living being in Soul, the primal source of energy that fuels entire biospheres. You might think that knowing how you will die for your entire life might make it less scary, a known quantity, but the 9 have human-like emotions, making them fear the inevitable, the primal drive for something that exists, to fear the unfamiliar void of non-existence. 9 views humanity as inextricably connected to itself, part of the interdependent causal chain that begins with fusing hydrogen in the core of the sun and ends with the death of each organism. This interconnected view then implies that humanity's fate is inextricably linked to the 9's. They are forced to scheme against fate together. In this view, even as the 9 manipulate humanity, they both are on the same side, vying to choose their own fate and gain freedom over their own destiny. Because the 9 operate through intermediaries and are shadowy figures, humanity has never had a very close relationship with them, like they have with the Traveler, their other god. However, 9 tries to change humanity's perspective, reminding us that they have been in Soul for longer than humanity's gardener god. The unsaid implication is that humanity needs to protect the 9 as they have protected the Traveler. As a brief aside, the implication that the 9 need life to exist to continue living makes it somewhat puzzling that 9 is connected to Soul. We know that Thea, even for its brief existence, had life on it, supporting the continued existence of that short-lived member of the 9. We also know that in Destiny, life tends to exist wherever it's possible, given that it arises on many planets and moons independently, specifically Earth, Europa, Titan, and Enceladus. It's ambiguous if the other planets have continuously held life, but we know the Vex retroactively inserted themselves into the histories of Mercury, Venus, and Neptune, leaving only Mars, Uranus, and the Sun ambiguous. It's easy to imagine single-celled life existing on Mars, and perhaps multicellular life prior to Mars losing its atmosphere. It has been hypothesized that life could also exist in the subsurface oceans of Uranus's moons as well, just like Europa and Enceladus. This then only leaves Soul as not containing native life to support their member of the 9. However, it's been proposed that a completely alien form of life, based on subatomic physics, could hypothetically exist in the cores of stars, feeding off of the fusion of elements. This is a fanciful idea that we have no way of definitively proving or ruling out right now, but if the 9 need life within their planetary body to exist, to seed their cognition, the implication could be that life exists within the core of the sun within Destiny. If the sun reached the end of its life cycle, that life probably wouldn't be able to continue to exist because it no longer is undergoing fusion. 9's entry continues by ruminating upon extinction. Many extinctions blot the gentle bend, the anxiety, the shockwaves of their scars felt through all layers. Always inescapable. Life burns out. Even me. But not you. That old illuminated abiogenesis. So bright and sharp in you. You have felt this. You are a weapon to defy fate. We've been eager. A non-dimensional being sinks into the fabric and wrinkles the ripples of fate. For attracted orbits to cross, I get the game. Life flourishes across Soul as you descend through epochs, as if stepping off your intended line, reaching into the seams, unfolding relativistic fabric, the edges curling back into an eternal recurrent knot from which they first receded. Complexity, fractalization, we're both life-givers, baby. The future deeper in, the past draped over and around you. Together we can circumvent established ends. I forge message knew from old all the time. You sink through space-time until a red giant engulfs the inner planets. You won't find the answers you want yet, darling. It is not time, the first time around. We can't all just snap our fingers and transcend our design. 9 shows the Guardian extinction, likely to remind us of 3's warning, the fate of humanity if no action is taken. 9's syntax is used to remind us of the traveler, who speaks between vertical bars. The word life is enclosed in vertical bars to symbolize the traveler's connection to the life of soul, and subtly call back to constellations and the Sunder doctrine lore, where the traveler speaks on life. Rather than repeating the traveler's message that life is not still, 9 tells us that life burns out. No organism can escape entropy and the heat death of the universe. 9 accepts that they will die, as one day the sun will exhaust its fuel and go out. However, 9 appeals to the weapon, the Guardian, saying that they can defy fate and defy death, referencing paracausal light. 9's message is clear. The Guardian is a weapon to defy humanity's fated extinction, the extinction that would also come for the 9, circling back to 3's prophecy that it's impossible to avert extinction, but that the weapon will do it. This rhetoric reminds me a lot of the Winnower's sword logic, which uses evolutionary principles to argue that only that which lives has the right to live. This reference is likely made knowingly, as the Guardian has proven themselves worthy of the sword logic a dozen times, defeating gods and monsters and outcompeting every foe. 9 wants to wield the Guardian as a paracausal weapon to make their own fate, and give future life to soul, which is fated for extinction without the weapon's intervention. 9's final lines are the most important. They say we will not find the answers we want the first time around, but will later. They also say that it's not easy to overcome fate. It's not a snap of the fingers. The Guardian has an impossible task ahead of them. This seems to imply that we will see a cycle, perhaps as early as Shattered Cycle. My prediction is that we will find ourselves trapped in a time loop like the Exo Stranger, witnessing the extinction of soul before being sent back in time to try and change the outcome. I think portraying this on screen would be the most interesting and visceral way to explore the central theme of fate and its mutability, as averted prophecies don't hit as hard if you don't see the alternative outcomes. The 9's view of the timeline could also lend itself to a cycle. They witness the end constantly, so if fate is changed, their memories will change as information from the future is sent to the past. This would lead to them seeing history as a cycle. Any change sent back to the beginning immediately. Perhaps this will be the main theme of Shattered Cycle. One's message contains themes of repetition, continuing the idea of a cycle. You will find your path because you have found your path. Through many iterations and great effort, it will draw us back. You stand in the corridors of time. Countless pathways are before you. One choice, another, no matter. There is a choice, a return, and an attempt made again, each in vain, each without progress or purchase. Mercury shifts between shade and light. We offer a chance, a subversion not taken until now, in this place that always was. To execute it, we must execute. To execute it, we must place the out-of-place pieces. You stand in the corridors of time. Countless pathways are before you. One choice, another, no matter. There is a choice, a return, and an attempt made again, each in vain, each without progress or purchase. We motion along the groove of the subversion, guiding. You are placed and now you must execute. Do you not see it is the only way? The voice heard as if the thought was your own. Your perspective locks on what previously remained unseen, but is now the only path before you. This probability is primed. One portrays the inner orbit conspiracy as a branching path in the corridors of time, the Vex simulation engine used to explore various timelines on Mercury. According to one, the inners have primed a fated pathway for the weapon, and all that is left for us to do is execute. It must happen because it has happened in the future, using the circular logic of predestination. It must happen because we must do it to survive. One wants the weapon to help move the remaining chess pieces into place, to create that future timeline, to winnow the pathways in the forest into a single one. One says they are offering a subversion of fate, a path not taken before in this cosmic cycle the Nine live within. I am reminded of the Guardian's grave in the corridors of time from Season of the Dawn. Perhaps we will see that timeline. Perhaps that grave comes from the timeline where the chain reaction, started by Soul's path, leads to extinction. The path where the weapon fails to enact its purpose and bind the Nine. The path one is talking about, that has never been seen before, is likely the future where the Guardian is able to bind the Nine. This implies that the Nine haven't seen it happen yet, but 3 has tried to create the conditions necessary for the Guardian to travel down that pathway. The groove of the Nine's subversion. 2 returns to the idea of the Traveler and the Nine's influence upon it. Greetings from 2, with tidings of undisclosed motivation, of your gardener who did not flee to Soul. It arrived to meet us in future flourishing. Contrast bleeds in streaks and wilting fuzz across your vision. Specters of terraforming linger like visual artifacts in your periphery. An inverted dimension of programming hums beneath your feet. A pyramid and cloud occupy overlaid space but differing time. Meteors turn the boiling surface to basalt, cooled into glass, as stillness takes the dying world. Its last grasp of atmosphere exhales away. The gardener once dreamed here that there was another proliferation, a pale badge of gleaming luminosity affixed to your chest. Locked outcomes, we consider, but present problem distracts from future questions. Many systems, in motion, too numerous to all be empty. The question remains, in the wrinkled fabric, why Soul? The color fades from sight. 2 does not see. Other seeds along the bend. Calls. Unanswered. There isn't an answer in you. Are we alone? We do not know. 2 shows us the Traveler and the Witness, reminding us of their conflict that recently came to a close. The Traveler believes that life will proliferate in Soul and potentially escape it. However, 2 says we must solve the present problem before that can happen. We must deal with the death of 3 and their prophecy of extinction. 2 reminds us of the uncertainty in the Traveler's motivations. We know it chose to stand its ground and not abandon humanity and Soul, but we don't know exactly why. There are numerous theories that it had no more systems to bless, that Savathun hid the veil, that the Traveler looked at the possible timelines and saw that humanity was best suited to defend it from the Witness, that the Nine intervened, or that the Traveler was simply tired of running. We know from Nine's message in quarantine that the Nine's presence at the very least influenced the Traveler's decision, whether they specifically caused the Traveler to come to Soul, or if they merely benefited from its arrival, a symbiosis. I think 2's final question is about the nature of the Nine. They are asking if the Nine are alone, if they have eldritch dark matter cousins born of other star systems. They have called out, but nobody has answered them. Thus, the Nine do not know if Soul is special for having the Nine, or if they are just one family of dark matter organisms out of many. I would love to find out the answer to this question. If equivalent dark matter consciousnesses existed around other stars, it would be interesting to see how they differ from the Nine. The implication is that if the Nine are unique to Soul, then that might be part of why the Traveler chose Soul, as they would fight to produce a timeline where humanity triumphed over the Witness, manipulating the timeline to create the best, most fruitful conditions for the defeat of the Witness, in order to ensure their own survival. With 3 dead, they do not appear in epochs and orbits. Instead, we move on to 4. 9. Since crust mantled core and time bloomed like primordial spores across existence. When thought first summited a world and screamed into the abyss, our formation answered. The fourth intellect invites a bridge between perspectives. Know that we are. Your hand extends. Space before you rots away, turns to heat and gas and fuel for another. In another step, the bone reconstructs and gives rise to gnarled strands of entwining muscle, gloved in flesh, reaching, alive. Before the creeping wrinkle of paracausality tugged on the fabric of our system, we stitch split seams with dampening quantum threads, opposing orders unopposed. We do not cross your wrinkled orbit bounties cherished, and for it we experience the glory of life held close, for a time too brief. Your hand brushes rubbery leaves in a fertile grove. The growth reaches skyward toward a wrinkled mass in the clouds. Cities flourish on the horizon. Life, cradled lovingly, briefly. All existence of merit wraps around this perihelion of my happiness. My cradled love, buried in rust. Your hand is desiccated entombment. Centuries bake the thin atmosphere and iron oxide desolation. The wind wails for you as a moon drifts overhead in shattered suffering. It does not have to be so for all. Dissonance threatens a possible peace, a possible freedom, and coveted life. None want death, those least who feel it always. In pattern, the fourth intellect tends the grave of our stillborn sister, tends to the sheathed weapon with war and oil, tends the orphaned ark of an emissary. Your hand reaches out to shake Lodi's. There is an implicit trust present. There is a weighty countenance behind his smile, where colder streams of consciousness loathe the ties that bind. 4 meets 3 and reveille. In the grief of loss, I care not for the rules. 4's entry features themes of decay and loss. 4 seems to grieve the loss of the short-lived multicellular life on Mars, potentially born early in the Sol system, then dying out due to the loss of its atmosphere. With the arrival of the Traveler, Mars was able to sustain an abundance of life again for a short time. This life was short-lived, as Mars didn't have a thick atmosphere, so that lush vegetation died out in the hundreds of years since the Golden Age. Yet life still clings to an existence in the cold deserts of the Red Planet, baked by the UV radiation from the sun. 4 also says they tend to the grave of the stillborn sister, which is the asteroid belt, based on the entry of epochs and orbits we looked at in Part 1. The colder streams of consciousness are almost certainly the outer orbits, as Mars would be the coldest of the inner orbits being farthest from the sun. 4 is saying that the outers loathe the ties to Sol's life, but 4 cherishes them like 3 does. Similarly, 4 mentions that peace is possible, which I interpret as saying they want the inners and outers to find peace, to reconcile their differences and work towards a shared agenda for the first time since the arrival of the Traveler. This is somewhat ironic as Mars is the god of war and Mars has traditionally been the base of operations for the Cabal in Sol, a warrior people. However, it's likely that 4 has seen the extent of war and grown weary of it, wishing for peace to flourish. 4 seems to be grieving 3 things in this entry: the death of 3, the death of its cities, and the death of the unborn member of the 9 in the asteroid belt. In this grief, 4 says that they don't care for the rules. They want peace at any cost, and they don't want to die, even though they've felt their death from birth. I'm not sure what the sheathed weapon with war and oil is, but my best guess would be that it's a reference to Keitel's Cabal, who have chosen diplomacy, to ally with the coalition to prevent war. If this is who 4 is referencing, we know this weapon won't remain sheathed for much longer. In the next expansion, Renegades, a faction of Keitel's Cabal will break free and become the Barrent Imperium, bringing war to Mars yet again. The orphaned ark of an emissary that 4 is tending to is likely either Oren's time as emissary that was cut short and abandoned as she quit, or Lodi's possible appointment as as emissary that hasn't happened yet, because the vote in the Edge of Fate was never completed. It's interesting that 4 specifically would be tending to these two things. Perhaps this means 4 will interfere in both somehow, creating a conspiracy to alter the outcome. I could see this happening in Renegades, given that it takes place primarily on Mars. Each of the 4 living inner orbits gives us a different perspective on their plans and conspiracy. They seek to use the weapon to change fate, to shatter the cycle of extinction, and allow life to proliferate in Sol. They also grieve the death of 3, and want peace to triumph in Sol. Their goals seem to be aligned with humanity's, at least for now, which makes sense given their desire to integrate into the world of physical matter. The outer orbits walk a different path, a darker path, that is hinted at becoming adversarial with humanity. The outer orbits begin beyond the asteroid belt with Jupiter, future pallbearer. If I remain the unignited nuclear heir, Sol will perish in maddening immortal atrophy. This first section is pretty straightforward. 5 is saying if they remain chained to Jupiter, the unignited nuclear heir, that Sol will die slowly. Jupiter is sometimes called a failed star because it's pretty close to the mass of the smallest type of stars, a brown dwarf. However, its mass is still like 13 times too small. 5 is referencing the outer orbits' desire to escape their dependence on matter life by building new worlds of dark matter. 5 wants to jump from Jupiter to a new world, and sees it as necessary to prevent the destruction of Sol. This is a different perspective than the inners. The inners want to prevent Sol's destruction, while the outers want to escape it, so they no longer need to care. The passage continues. Our future clings to a corrected deterministic prediction, servile minds amassing to be engulfed by my galactic nucleic arc horizon, to usurp conduction, to pacify a choir of sating vassals. The dead world shudders and splits. The surface dives to the core in a surge of gluttonous autosarcophagi. What once failed to be a star condenses itself, feeds upon great streams of matter from a vast collective of mind-bent supplicants, until light cannot escape its singularity. The second half of this quote makes it clear that 5 wants to convert Jupiter into a black hole, compressing the planet's matter so deeply that it undergoes gravitational collapse into a singularity. When we look at the first half, it makes it seem like 5 wants to do this in order to escape fate. The references to usurping conduction and pacifying a choir of vassals makes me think of the conductor. Putting everything together, I think 5 wants to use the conductor and her echo to force servile minds, or the Vex, to convert Jupiter into a black hole. A final passage from this entry explains why. When they fade, only I will remain. Heed not the gravity of fate. 5 is saying that its plan to build a black hole using the Vex is a play to outlast the other members of the 9, because only black holes can survive until the end of the universe, reaching its heat death. I find this plan curious because it has a huge problem. Black holes by nature pull anything that crosses their event horizon into the singularity, trapping it in the folds of spacetime so deeply that nothing can escape, not even light. If the dark matter that makes up 5 was pulled past the event horizon, those neurons would effectively be lost forever. The only way 5 could survive is by arranging its dark matter into a stable orbit around the black hole, and feeding off of the gravitational waves produced by other matter falling in. This is unless somehow the dark matter in Destiny is able to return from a black hole, which doesn't make much sense physically. However, we did see this happen to the Hall in the Edge of Fate. I do also see a potential solution to the problem of maintaining life after conversion to a black hole. Black holes create immense time dilation near their event horizons, slowing the clocks of any observer down until they effectively stop. If 5 sacrificed life to this black hole, they could feed off of that life, effectively continuing to exist for an eternity as its perspective is dilated by the black hole. If the black hole was the same mass as Jupiter, Jupiter's moons could also maintain stable orbits and support life perpetually. It makes sense that 5 specifically wants to use the conductor and her Vex to achieve this, as the Vex could be commanded by the Echo to sacrifice themselves. The next member of the outer orbits to speak is 7. Only a small portion of its entry gives us new information. We see, plus you see, plus out ahead, plus a diversion of fate. We exhaust ourselves, waiting to give a small push. You hold the chain in perpetuity. You hold nothing but shattered remnants. 7 is saying that at some point in the future, the Guardian will change Soul's fate, and that it has taken all of the Nine's power to give the Guardian the push they need to make that change. This harkens back to the quote in Dust about how weak the Nine are, despite how mighty their size is. It takes immense effort for them to interact with the matter world, which is part of why they can only make tiny adjustments, changing the harmonics of the chords of history. However, as we've seen, a small adjustment can have huge consequences via the butterfly effect. The Guardian sees a physical manifestation of the chains of causality shattered, implying their paracausal power will break fate and shatter the cycle, creating a causal paradox. 7 concludes, "You trust because you are trusted, a mirror of a mirror. You trust because you feel strong, as we made you. You feel the familiarity of death. You have felt it many times. This time there is no malice, just indifferent intent. 2 truths to know about the inners. Very polite, and they do not mean it." This quote references the Nine's intervention in the Guardian's past, with 7 claiming the Nine made the Guardian strong. This is probably a reference to the Nine's intervention in the Light and Darkness saga, manipulating the Guardian's life to make them as strong as possible, so they could become the fated weapon. It also could be a reference to the idea that the Nine's manipulation of soul made it fertile ground, enticing the traveler to come and give humanity the light. Calling the Guardian a mirror of a mirror sounds almost like a fourth wall break to me, as the Guardian is silent and reserved, so that players can project their personalities into the character they play, making the Guardian a mirror of the player. Calling the Guardian a mirror of a mirror could also be 7 calling us a copy of a copy. We are a dead person who was resurrected by a ghost and lost our memories, essentially getting a new slate and becoming a new person. And then we've died many times over and been resurrected by our ghost, copying us like a mirror. It reminds me of Maya's manipulations of Saint 14 during episode Echoes, where she calls him a copy of a copy. Technically, any Guardian would be a copy of a copy. The question then is how much of our identity is preserved each time we die and are resurrected. Destiny would lead us to believe that it's everything, but again, we don't really know how that would work. 7 is also trying to make the Guardian doubt themselves here, saying that we are only trusted by our allies because we are strong, and we only are strong because the Nine made us that way. 7 is basically trying to take credit for the Guardian's success. The final 2 lines are the most interesting ones. 7 claims that the inners are polite, but they are liars. They hide behind the mask of affability to gain our favor, when really they mean to manipulate us. 7 is trying to turn us against the inners, who we at least for now seem to be allied with. It's hard to tell if 7 is telling the truth or not, but it's worth keeping in mind that even if our goals may seem aligned right now, the inners live a very different life than us. They may have agendas we are not privy to that may cause us to come into conflict with them in the future. It's good advice to be cautious when bargaining with an alien god, but this could be just another manipulation. The outers trying to pull the Guardian into their orbit against the inners. The next message is from 8 and is arguably the most cryptic one so far. They try to show us their perspective as a god hanging above reality, lonely in the vast expanse of space. Stillness without equals discovery within. It is empty. Out in the distance, 8 dull glints of life defy the expansive vacuity. You rest in a gulf of tranquility between solar passes. They leave no mark as the skip stone makes no impression until it contacts water again. Restrictions equal innovation. A long period passes, like waves between breaths. You sit staring into an oceanic abyss, a horizon, a skyline pocked in nebulaic cloud, processing the long arc of time. Many things pass and pay no heed. War rages in cosmic paracausal wrinkles, like thunder from cracks of lightning in the sky, wrapped in watchful dark matter bands trailing celestial hosts. Thought rained into the isolation with meteoric impression. Clashing forces equal precious metals and fostered sentience. 9 shadows veiled equal 9 orbits cast away. 8 seems to be very pensive, using its isolation and long life for thought and self-discovery. 8 almost feels like an indifferent god in this passage, not caring what happens in the world of matter life, ignoring the collapse, ignoring the tragedy of the matter world, instead focusing on itself and learning to innovate within the restrictions of its dark matter body. This is in contrast to the other Outers, who seem more interested in the affairs of matter and how they can use them for their goals. You feel the surge of feverish connectivity, sparking reactive embers into ignition. You stand before the veil on Neptune. Maya Sundaresh reaches for it, the conductor for it, the veil, some amorphic form, for a distortion in the fabric of the possible, split by choice, assured in action. 9 minds focus, echoing. Light wrinkles and your eyes fail. Altered reality equals freedom achieved. Again, we have another reference to the conductor, showing that she clearly is part of the Outer's plan. The conductor got her start on Neptune, in Maya Sundaresh's experiments with the veil, attempting to harness its power for humanity. 8 would have a close connection to the veil as 3 does with the Traveler, given it has rested upon their shores since the collapse. 8 would have watched the arrival of the Exodus Indigo and saw Neomuna grow around the veil. There's an implication here that the Outers see something of themselves in the conductor. She's trying to alter reality, to make a new world of her own creation, a second golden age. The Outers have a similar goal: create a world of dark matter separate from the matter world, to find freedom. 8's message concludes cryptically: your joints, stiff, your mouth, dry. The gardener equals unending sapient nourishment. We equal 1 cycle. 8 appears to be comparing the 9 to the Traveler, saying that the 9 are in a cycle with it. I'm not sure what that means because there's not a lot to go off of. 8 could just be referencing the existence of the cycle, or they could be implying that humanity should stop relying on the Traveler to survive, just as the 9 want to stop relying on matter life to survive. They also could be saying that the 9 caused the Traveler to arrive in Soul, which then changes the future of the 9, creating the cycle of fate central to the Fate saga. 8 also could just be referring to the Guardian when they say we equal 1 cycle, saying that we're trapped in a cycle of history with the 9. 6's message has been saved for last by the writers because it's the most important, and contains some of the biggest revelations for the future of the Fate saga. Consciousness flows between glistening rings and an ascendant mirror that reflects captured notion as caricatured nature. You are drawn down into an ascendant well, ravenously gulping negative pressure into a supranormal maw, more gluttonous than any mass point-driven drive. Welcome, Greymate. I am 6, who spans the birth and fall of corporeal deities aplenty. The rings of Saturn pass beneath you. The planet looms large ahead. You sit in the cockpit of an awoken interceptor as the dreadnought's aversion wave crashes over the fleet, taking the Queen. You watch as 6 light bearers stand triumphant, your body eroding away into non-existence. The first section is about Six seeing itself as greater than deities of matter life, in particular Oryx, who was killed in the orbit of Saturn during the Taken War, and also Mara Sov, who used the Taken War to create a throne world and become a god. There also seems to be a connection between Six and the Ascendant Plane, influenced by the deep connection of Oryx's throne world aboard the Dreadnought, influencing Six's mind. The Dreadnought is built by flipping Oryx's throne world, a pocket of the Ascendant Plane, inside out and causing it to bleed into the physical plane. So it makes sense that the Ascendant Plane would start to influence Six's consciousness, after a large portion of it has been parked in Saturn's orbit for a decade. In the vignettes in brackets, the Guardian seems to be seeing a vision of the Taken War from various characters' perspectives, provided by Six. This again is about the link between Oryx and Six caused by the particles that make up Six bleeding into the Dreadnought. This also implies a connection between Six and Episode Heresy, where the Echo of Navigation causes Oryx to be reborn and die again. Six is saying that they will outlast the deities of the matter world. The passage continues. The weight of my prison is known to no other bound in the shadow of mass, even the fiery pomp of self-import. My freedom is due. The Dreadnought wriggles and riggers as worm, as Akka, as petrified life. It is not so different a prison than an unliving planet. A throne, a world, alive in the agonizing stillness of once distant death. You must rip out. The next part is a pretty direct reference to Destiny 1 and the music of the spheres. The song that represents Saturn is called The Prison. Originally, the campaign of Destiny 1 would have featured the Dreadnought, and the player would allegedly rescue an exo containing the mind of Rasputin from a prison aboard the Dreadnought, which is part of why it's associated with the word prison. Here, Six is saying that the mass of the Dreadnought is part of its prison, the matter that chains its mind to the physical world. The fiery pomp of self-import is likely a direct reference to 9, living in the shadow of the sun. Six is saying that the weight of their prison, of Saturn, of the Dreadnought, is far greater than the prison of any other member of the 9, including the sun. Whether that's an exaggeration is kind of hard to tell. No other member of the 9 has part of the Ascendant Plane making up the mass that binds them to Soul. Mercury is still in the Ascendant Plane after it was taken by the Witness, but we don't know if one can bleed into the Ascendant Plane because Mercury is there. Io is also still in the Ascendant Plane, but it makes up a tiny fraction of the mass of the Jovian system, which controls 5. Out of all of the 9, it seems like 1 should be the most influenced by the Ascendant Plane, but since we don't know what's happening on Mercury or what's going on with 1, it's hard to tell. Six wants freedom from this existence, freedom from the prison of the Dreadnought and Saturn. The passage concludes with a huge lore drop. I am nourished by the oldest of sapient wills. My bounds contain the extent of their secrets. Saturn, reflected in ascension, drinks from taken wills and dreaded offerings. I harbor no fear for you, for in the end, fate is made by the strong, and you are only flesh. A great blade is extended before you, surrounded by many broken others. No weapon can kill what is woven into the fabric of existence. No shackle can halt my divergence to an ascendant orbit. This I have learned from that which gives rise to itself. You hold the blade. The traveler hangs, without orbit, without motion, against the system. You feel the fervor of a mind raised by the sword. When you are told to kneel, remember who stands above you. For we have known many things that kill you. You crash to reality and death. Six appears to be amassing power from the Taken and Dread, having part of their mind transported to the Ascendant Plane by the Dreadnought. They appear to have watched Oryx and the Hive and learned from the sword logic of the Winnower, paracausal darkness. 6 implies that they want to travel into the Ascendant Plane and use the sword logic to empower themselves, stealing the Taken throne for themselves to become strong. A new lord for the Taken and Dread to worship, and for the Guardian to bow down to at the threat of violence. 6 is usurping the throne that should be the Guardian's by right as they kill Oryx in his throne world and gain the sword logic of killing him. However, the Guardian rejects this title, refusing to take up Oryx's mantle. In episode Heresy, a new voice controlling the Taken and Dread arises, subverting the sword logic to amass power. In the Songs of Descent lorebook, this commander calls themselves Lord of Every Nothing. I believe that this entry strongly implies that 6 is the Lord of Every Nothing, the new god leading the Taken and the Dread. Under this interpretation, 6 is trying to use the darkness and the power it accretes from the Taken and Dread to build power, creating an army of matter life that seeds its consciousness, making it truly independent from the mass shadows of soul's life, without need for transmutation to a new form. This is probably the most achievable and direct path any member of the 9 has to break free from the bounds of soul's life and make their own fate. 6 wouldn't even need to change anything. They just would need to control enough Taken and Dread that they have a majority control over the mass shadows that seed their mind. I'm sure that 6 has greater plans and an agenda once this happens, likely to take all life and soul like Oryx wanted to back during the Taken King, in order to gain control of soul so that 6 could control all of the 9. 6 being the Lord of Every Nothing connects pretty directly to a line from the Sunder Doctrine lore. Karev's whispers break the tightening chords of the hum from Saturn's rings. The identity of the Lord of Every Nothing was in front of us the whole time. The hum from Saturn's rings is the dark matter that makes up 6, and flows through the Dreadnought into the Ascendant Plane, gaining control over the Taken and Dread, now that they are leaderless. This positions 6 as the new leader for the Taken and Dread during the Fate Saga, and is likely going to put us into direct conflict with the Outers via 6's thrall. I'm guessing the 9's control over the Ascendant Plane and counterfeit Taken they provided to Drifter for Gambit, and controlled in Prophecy, were acquired via 6's connection to the Ascendant Plane and the Dreadnought. This is the most reasonable explanation, but is still an inference at this point. I think it's worth revisiting Waiting Song from episode Heresy, because it tells us the goals of the Lord of Every Nothing. A silent song, a whispered song, a quiet song in the broken sea, spoken without speaking, by the will without. My blade reshaped speaks for me. In inhabited dimensions, on the rich fields, between the stars, a sweep of its arm and atoms scatter, particles spin entangled, I spin with them. Worshippers give praise, idolaters perform rite, give glory and homage to the growing God. Should the edge of my knife go blunt, should the arms of my petitioners lower, should the congregation never sing again, the will lives, the will feasts, the will spins on. Pour food in the sea, still I eat. Quiet voice in the dark, still I am heard. You who want power, you who want deity, take shelter in me. As cyclone grows from seed, as currents feed the whirlpool, as planetesimals collect dust, so grows the will without will, till I stand without caveat, speaking in my own voice, walking the fields of life, guide, will, king, Lord of Every Nothing. The references to dust and particles scattered between the stars, in retrospect, seems like a pretty obvious reference to the dark matter that makes up 6. 6 wants to grow in power via the Ascendant Plane and sword logic, until they can have a throne world of their own, and stand without caveat, seeding their own cognition without dependence on matter life, and gain a voice without an intermediary. During episode Heresy, they use Keat Air as an emissary to the Taken and Dread, using it to speak for them and gain worshippers. After the Guardian kills Kate Air at the end of episode Heresy, 6 would no longer have this voice, but they likely still have a large portion of the Taken and Dread under their control. They simply need to amass more power until they can stand on their own without intermediaries. 6 steals power from their new worshippers, the Taken and Dread, in service of this purpose. This makes 6 the most formidable threat among the 9. If you want to learn more about this, you can watch my video on the Taken and Dread from episode Heresy. While all we know of the Inner Orbit conspiracy comes from the Edge of Fate and epochs and orbits, the Ghost Shell from the Desert Perpetual contains a conversation that reveals very direct evidence about the outer conspiracy. It begins. 5 says, "Gather in proposed divergence to control a virulent eternal sentience, unbound by orbits, unbound by mass, nearer, apathetic to our motions." 5 has found an intermediary to vast minds, reaching with frail mineral forceps, attempting to command, a tool of schisms. 5 announces to the outer orbits that they have discovered a mind of matter that is dangerous and unaware of the 9. They propose that this mind be used as an intermediary, like an emissary. Attempting to command a tool of schisms implies this is none other than the conductor, wielding the echo of command to control the Nessian schism Vex. This circles back to 5's desire to control the conductor and her Vex for their plans. The other outers respond to this idea. 7 says, "Assurances are necessary, and the conductor is quantum uncertainty and multiplicative variable." 7 is concerned about using the conductor because they are afraid she will bring too much uncertainty, having an agenda of her own. The implication is that they don't know what impact using her will have on the timeline. 7 fears the conductor could cause an undesirable outcome for the outers. Next, 8 responds. Acting possibilities equal parlous superposition. Veiled memories left equals cycle unrealized. Cyclical everdeath equals omnidirectional singularity. 8 responds to 7's uncertainty about the impact on the timeline, saying that any act they take will cause uncertainty, not just using the conductor. They reference veiled memories, which I see 2 interpretations of. Either this is a reference to the veil and the consciousnesses within it, or the conductor, who was created by it, being needed to create the cycle, or it means that the 9 are unable to see certain memories of the future, meaning that the cycle has not concluded yet. 8 then refers to the cycle as everdeath and an omnidirectional singularity, which implies that no matter what action they take, the timeline will always converge upon the extinction event prophesized by 3. 8 is making an analogy to a black hole. Once matter travels inside the event horizon of a black hole, all possible world lines converge on the singularity at its heart, meaning that no matter what it does, it will find itself captured by the singularity. This implies that the nature of fate means that something about the death of 3 makes it the event horizon for the extinction event. Fate prescribes the death and repeat of the unending cycle once 3 dies. Next, 6 responds. Plasmic auroras send eerie wails into the black. Skittering ricochets across Enceladus and through the Ascendant Realm. 6 says, "Our strength is absolute as I have seen it. We shall exert our will. The tool of conduction will bear a scheme by fated law, as we dictate." I want to briefly comment on the fact that Enceladus is mentioned by name here. Enceladus is an icy moon on Saturn that we haven't visited yet in Destiny, despite it being mentioned several times in different places in the lore. This is a bit of a long shot, but I can see a potential future expansion focused on 6 as Lord of Every Nothing and the Taken and Dread, occurring on Enceladus since it's part of 6's domain. 6 speaks from the Ascendant Realm to their fellow Outers, claiming they have seen the future and the Outers will always triumph, exerting their will upon soul, like a dark commander controls a taken thrall. 6 says that the conductor will set in motion a conspiracy directed by the Outers that is divined by fate. If 6 is telling the truth and has seen this in the future, it implies that the outer conspiracy is fated to succeed and involves utilizing the conductor. It could also allow them to escape the binds of matter life, but cause the extinction event 3 prophesizes in the process. 5 responds, draw conduction into our realm, eclipse paracausality in abeyance, but a figment of valent coalescence, to be silent. 5 wants to utilize the conductor and bring her into unknown space and the outer orbits. The next line is a bit cryptic, but I think 5 is talking about the conductor, saying that there is more that she doesn't have than she has paracausal power, referencing Maya's desired golden age. Her wants are not within her grasp because they are too many or too impossible compared to her paracausal power. Then, it seems like 5 is saying that what holds the conductor together will go silent, likely referencing the fact that Taekwal, the QU commander that Maya is utilizing the memory of via the Echo of Command, will die, going silent, weakening the power that binds the Vex to Maya. The lore of the Desert Perpetual implies that Taekwal is damaged and possibly killed when the conductor tries to force 3 to do the impossible, breaking the Echo. She is undeterred and wants to trade the present Earth of Lead into her Earth of Gold from the Golden Age, forcing 3 to do impossible alchemy. Next, 8 responds to 5. Solitude within the unknown equals apparent falsehood. Avuncular 3 or 4 in surprise equals coddler's discovery to set motion. We would not be alone equals we would not be alone. 8 says that it appears they are not alone in the unknown, and that 3 or 4 are surprised to have discovered something. It derisively calls them coddlers, and references their relationship with the life of soul. This discovery made by 3 or 4 is going to set something in motion that will cause the outer orbits to no longer be alone in not knowing the future. I'm guessing this is a reference to the inner orbits constructing a plan for reckoning with 3's death. This also implies that this lore entry takes place prior to the events of the Edge of Fate. 6 speaks next. The emissary delivers an invitation to the schismed mind, opening freeing uncertainty. I have seen it as 5 knows it to be, so have we all. 5 echoes. It is. There are a few ways to interpret this. Either 6 has sent an invitation to the conductor, which prompts her to travel to Kepler and kill 3, or the inners did, knowing they can't stop 3's death. This action opens uncertainty for the outer orbits, allowing them to construct their conspiracy. I think it's more likely 6 sent the invitation, because the outers have far more to gain from the death of an inner than the inners do. If 6 sent the invitation, they have effectively committed fratricide by setting in motion the meeting that leads to 3's death. 6 confirms 5's vision of the future, bringing the conductor in league with the outer orbits to complete their conspiracy. Next, 7 makes a suggestion. Blithe and actions and conducting and attracting and danger. A weapon is needed, and offers made and accepted, and future armaments opposing. 8 says, assurances are needed equal a weapon is needed to contain and fell. Inners will dislike this course of action, equals another will speak for us. 5 says, do not cower behind a weapon. 6 says, bend 5, assurances given. 7 points out the danger in working with the conductor, bringing the death of their sibling and threatening to cause a war between the 2 factions. 7 wants to ensure the survival of the outers, so they say a weapon is needed for the future. 8 agrees that this is necessary, pointing out that the inners will dislike the outer plan when it comes to light. They also say that another will speak for them, which means the inners will try to appoint a new emissary, Lodi, or perhaps the conductor will speak on the outers' behalf. 5 is unhappy with this, seeing a weapon as unnecessary. 6 rebukes 5, assuring them that the weapon will not prevent the outer plans from coming to fruition. The lore entry then ends with 6 discussing the plan. In this divergence, there is outer alignment, an invitation, a tool, a sacrifice, an emissary, an assured weapon, only forward as it is known. The divergence is the meeting between the outers that takes place in this lore entry. 6 is saying that the meeting has produced agreement between them. Then they list the components of the plan. The invitation is probably the one they had the emissaries send to the conductor. The tool is the conductor. The sacrifice could either be 3, dying for the outer plans, or the conductor, killed at the hands of the weapon-to-be in vengeance. The emissary is Lodi, who has not become emissary as of the end of the Edge of Fate. The assured weapon is the Guardian, who has been confirmed already. Only forward is likely a reference to both chronal flow and that the outers seek to break the cycle, causing the future to progress without the death that leads back to the past. What exactly the outers are planning is unclear, but it seems like they are manipulating the conductor in order to achieve their ends, and they are willing to sacrifice their sibling 3 to get what they want. We see her enter unknown space in the Desert Perpetual and try to make a trade, replacing 3's corpse with a still living version of them from the past. This attempt is a failure. It's unclear if the outers sanction this, or if Maya is working on her own. There's one final piece of lore from the Desert Perpetual about the outer conspiracy. However, it's technically a spoiler if you're watching this video before the launch of the Epic Raid a few days from now, as it comes on one of the new weapons. However, it's been in the API since the launch of Ash and Iron, so I'm gonna cover it here. Skip to the timecode on screen if you don't want to hear this entry yet. The entry begins. 5 says, failure meets our every effort, ever bound and ever binding, leashed by gravity and unwilling will. 5 starts off by lamenting the failure of previous attempts to break fate and escape the binds to the matter world of soul. The final line likely refers to the gravitational interaction with the cores of the worlds of soul that bind each member of the 9 to the matter world. Unwilling will is likely referring to the life upon those worlds that doesn't cooperate with the outers in order to break those binds. Most of that matter isn't simply unwilling, they just don't know the 9 exist, but those who do don't usually put effort in to help because the 9 are incomprehensible to them. 8 responds, comrade cousin life, cord snipped equals a song complete too soon. This cannot be the end equals swear it will not happen again. 8 asks for assurances that no further members of the 9 will die following 3's untimely end. They appear to see the death of any member of the 9 as a bridge too far, even if it benefits the outers. 7 disagrees. Repeat the experiment and reduplicate our work. Where one singularity grows and another may form, why fear and why argue? The work awaits. 7 references an experiment, likely something required for the completion of the outer plans. They seem to be more okay with 3's death, and suggest that another member of the 9 may die given that they say another singularity may form, referencing the singularity on Kepler that formed with the death of 3. They rebuke 8, saying not to question the work and continue executing the plan. 8 doesn't like this. 8 says, we risk ourselves equals we risk the plan. 8 believes that allowing members of the 9 to die puts the outer agenda at risk. 6 disagrees. A sacrifice of effort, a waste of mind. 6 is saying that something is a waste of time and effort. I'm guessing they're referring to 8's worries about members of the 9 dying or the current conversation. 7 speaks next. Our plans advance. We will be free. 6 says, not so long as stalemate strangles us. 6 rebukes 7's statement that the plan continues and the outers will be free. 6 thinks if the stalemate in the 9 continues, the outer plan cannot happen. We can then infer that part of the plan requires a vote among the 9, perhaps making the conductor emissary instead of Lodi. 8 will not stand down. 8 says, old ideas equal old results. Think new thoughts equal claim new tools. Something safe and swaddled equals alive and willing. 8 says that they need to rethink their plan. They seem to start taking 3's perspective, saying that keeping life safe will keep the 9 alive. Their perspective has appeared to shift in the face of 3's death, and they start to prioritize continuing living over everything. 5 says, our enemies are inner cousins, alerted to our work. Stalemate threatened by tiebreaker 9. 5 says that apparently the Inners have become aware of the Outer plans. However, this is curious, as the Inners should already know of the Outer plan in the past, given that the 9 see the future, unless the timeline is being rewritten as we speak. 5 also says that the Outer plan is threatened by the tiebreaker vote, which in this case could be 8, as their perspective starts to shift in favor of the Inners. The previous tiebreaker vote was 3, who is now dead. The stalemate being threatened by a tiebreaker vote could also be a reference to the events of the Desert Perpetual, where the Outers panic that if 3 is successfully returned to the present, alive, that their tie will be broken, allowing the Inners to force their agenda once again. The entry ends with a statement of intent from 6. 6 says, I claim enough causality for this. If others do not act, I will. They will use their paracausal power from the ascendant plane to prevent the tie from breaking, and fate to be changed. What actions could save the plan are unclear. The tie must be broken, and the only path I can see is the deaths of more 9, unless somehow 6 can sway an Inner to their side. The title of this lore entry, Cusp Sempiternal, is a bit of an oxymoron. A cusp is the threshold between two different states, while sempiternal means something eternal and unchanging. I see this title as referencing the paradox in 3's prophecy. Fate cannot be changed, but the weapon will change it. It represents the threshold of moving from one eternal fate to another by altering the timeline. It also reminds me of the fact that the 9 see all of time simultaneously, meaning any change to the future manifests as the shifting sands of fate, of an everlasting truth. In this case, given 8's new perspective and doubts, the outer plan may be on the cusp of eternal failure, given a potential defection. It seems that currently humanity is in alignment with the plans of the inner orbits, and against the plans of the outer orbits, especially given the reveal that 6 is the Lord of Every Nothing, and that the outers are using the conductor for their plans. Whether that will change remains to be seen in our fated future. Will the tie break? Will 8 defect? Will the outer plan bring extinction? Will they escape their connection to the world of matter and leave Soul to meet its fate? There are prophecies of the future that may give us an answer. Ash and Iron released with a new lore entry from the perspective of 3, likely reflecting on the prophecy of extinction prior to their death. It reads, all too familiar, all too different, drip, 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 drip. Opened wounds infect murky soil, a vanquished corpse poisoning each leaf, and branch, and trunk, with sour taste and rotten aroma, a dead core bringing no heat, streams and lakes with heavy waters, impossible to swim, nights an hour shorter, days 2 hours longer, the decayed crops and perverse time merely widened the hole in a vengeful heart, a world cursed, and sick, and broken, and a cure unknown, yet they find reason to persist, and keep on living, on an earthly cadaver. This lore tab elaborates on 3's prophecy of extinction, describing it beginning to take effect. Earth has begun decaying now that 3 has died and is no longer there to interact with it. 3's corpse has started to make Earth sick, poisoning the core of the planet, slowing down its rotation to accelerate tidal locking, and bringing plague and famine, threatening to cause an ecological collapse. I believe the lines, merely widen the hole in a vengeful heart, are referring to the conductor, as she seeks vengeance for the Golden Age, which is why she killed 3. But this makes her more vengeful, as her actions bring Earth further from the Golden Age, by inviting extinction and destruction. The conductor's actions have backfired spectacularly, and we're beginning to see their after effects. The As Without lorebook also describes several emergent effects on Earth. I'm not going to read the original entries here, but I will enumerate the described impacts of 3's death. Holes form in Earth's surface that begin to fill with water. The rain changes color, turning magenta and staining clothes and armor like blood. 3's corpse emits a ringing hum just below the range of human hearing. People start to get sick with what's dubbed chital cough. Rocks and minerals start moving on their own. These rocks cause tiny earthquakes. Soil starts to rot, poisoning plants and causing them to emit flammable gas. Earth is dying, which will likely contribute to 3's prophecy of extinction. Soon, humanity's birthplace may become uninhabitable for them. Anamorphosis contains an entry I've saved for last because it discusses the future. The emissary experiences prophecies of time to come. It comes in an entry titled Kresmoi, or Ancient Greek for prophecy or oracle. We can analyze this entry and attempt to divine humanity's fate. What's happening here is the emissary is using the Nine's nonlinear relationship with time to peer into the future and see humanity's fate, so she can warn them of what's to come in the Fate Saga. I'm going to take this line by line because it's very metaphorical. Kresmoi begins: a ditch, a hut, a squat village, a city, steel teeth eating the sky. This is likely the evolution of the last city or human civilization in general. It begins with ditches that give way to primitive structures like huts that grow to become a village, then a city filled with skyscrapers of metal, steel teeth that eat the sky. Eating the sky could either be a reference to pollution or civilization expanding to urbanize most of the Earth. We know from ecdysis that Orin is present during the birth of the last city, seeing it grow from a camp of tents into a sprawling metropolis. Either way, this seems like a reference to Orin's or humanity's past. The next line reads, dive, dive, dive. They dug too deep for comfort, too shallow for understanding. It haunts the halls, waiting, existential midwifery. I think the they in this entry are the Nine. Under that interpretation, Orin is referencing her time as the emissary. The Nine cut away at her will, changing her deeply, while at the same time not going far enough to truly understand her. As emissary, she's caught between their wills, their competing agendas, as they try to wield her like a puppet, and yet they don't understand her well enough to effectively wield her. Meanwhile, the rest of the line would be about Orin herself. She's trying to understand the Nine. She knows she doesn't fully understand them. Orin is left with a terrible existence, acting as an agent for petulant children who want a puppet, but don't take the time to understand that puppet, treating them as less than human. Orin is waiting for the Nine to understand her, but they never will. Her existence as emissary is midwifery. She's trying to help the Nine birth their schemes and ideas constantly, while they don't have much regard for her. This is part of why she decides to leave. 6 notices the emissary reaching for the future and chastises her. Emissary, you overstep your bounds. The voice rattles your electrons, sets your strings to screaming. You push onwards. You snatch at 1,000 lifelines. A rusty sea, a figure so small, a future so vast, a micrometeorite delivered to the cranium, a weapon to be. One little light, awaiting another. I'm guessing this is the birth of the Guardian, the rusty sea being the cosmodrome, the small figure either being the Guardian or Ghost. Ghost creates a future for the Guardian, allowing them to be the weapon and serving as their little light. The micrometeorite to the cranium could be literal, perhaps the way the Guardian originally died, or it could be figurative, about Ghost giving the Guardian light, reanimating them from the dead. You could instead argue that the rusty sea is a reference to Mars, as it's a characteristic rust color, but I think the cosmodrome idea fits too well. If it is Mars, this would then likely be a prophecy for something to come in Renegades, foretelling the Barrent Imperium's doomsday weapon, and the little light, which would be Dredge and Bale or their ghost. The prophecy continues. No time to even scream. Red sky at morning. Sailors warning. Rattle. Drag, rattle, drag, 2 eyes bear witness. If we presume the previous line was about the cosmodrome, then this could easily be explained as the Guardian being attacked by the Elixni just after they're born. The eyes could be the exo-stranger watching the Guardian. If it was about renegades, this line is probably about Mars. There's a kind of battle in the morning, violence with a single witness, something that stains the sky red with blood, perhaps 3's death, or maybe even 4's. Next, 9 notices the emissary's efforts and tries to figure out what she's doing. Just what do you think you're doing? What you came here to do, in the first place. 9 pairs of hands rip at your atoms in rebuke. You grit your teeth through the pain, sift the silt, look for gold. Where is it? Where? The 9 try to intervene and stop Orin, but she continues her search for the prophecy. She's looking for gold in silt, a reference to gold rushes, and panning for gold in a riverbed. Given that the conductor is the alchemist based on the metaphor from the imminent, gold is a reference to the Golden Age. The next line seems to be what Orin was looking for. A row of calibration weights, 2 women, laughing, the scale tipping, the heaviest crown bows for the executioner's blade. This entry is likely about justice, using scales and counterweights as a visual metaphor for it. Then we see someone bend over as they're being executed by a blade, possibly a guillotine or just a sword. Justice has been dispensed on this person, the one with the crown. This line is probably about the conductor. The women laughing would then be Chioma and Maya in a memory of their golden age, before everything fell apart. This would be a description of dispensing justice, the conductor thinking about why she's doing this before she kills one of the copies of the Ishtar researchers. Based on the imminent, she views killing them as ending a delusion, copies that don't deserve to exist. This also could be the conductor's death at the hands of the weapon. Justice being served for 3's death. Vengeance. The prophecy continues. A bouquet of roses on an empty grave. Frankenstein's monster, gasping on the table. What is old is new again. This line is an allusion to Frankenstein. It's about someone having their grave exhumed, then being revived from the dead, gaining a second lease on life. Who is resurrected from the dead is unclear to me, but it could be about the resurrection of a new light bearer. It also could be about Drifter bringing the Hall to temporarily resurrect 3, or perhaps a second resurrection using the Hall, either 3 or another dead god. If this entry is not literal and is more metaphorical, it sounds a lot like a cycle repeating, the natural order of life being subverted by winding back the clock. This could be a reference to Shattered Cycle or the cycle the weapon may find themselves in, dying only to be born again. Seeing that their siblings failed, 8 now tries to intervene. Is the honored emissary now a petulant child? You collapse into confetti. You hold each flake together with all your might. You were Nasaya. You were Nasan. You will be Orin again. 8 tries to stop Orin from rebelling against the 9's authority, spaghettifying her. However, Orin resists, remembering all of her previous lives before becoming the emissary and wanting to retain her will and escape the 9's clutches to be free again. The prophecy continues in the next line. An iron carriage thundering along a high road. In older practices, a circle was thought to contain magical energies, a musical thrum. Answer it, redacted. The iron carriage evokes old-timey horse-drawn carriages that are modernized, perhaps into a car or some kind of futuristic vehicle. The next line is pretty obviously referencing alchemy, as a circle with a dot was the alchemical symbol for both gold and the sun. Both the sun and gold were seen as possessing a divine purity and magical energy. Perhaps this is what Orin was searching for, an event that will happen in The Alchemist. If gold represents the Golden Age, iron could also represent the current age, the one the conductor wants to turn to gold, as it thunders along the road towards extinction. The iron carriage could be a hearse, carrying the coffins of the life of soul. The circle could also be a reference to the cycle. The cycle hums and someone is commanded to answer it. The redacted name has 4 characters, so I'm guessing it's Maya. It could be her answering the call to alchemy, trying to bring the Golden Age. However, Lodi also has 4 characters, so it could be him who's answering the call of the alchemist or the cycle. Perhaps this is when he ascends to become the next emissary. Further yet, 9 has 4 characters, so it could be a call for either the 9 collectively to answer the call of alchemy, or specifically 9, the member associated with the sun. This also makes a lot of sense given the alchemical connection between gold and the sun. Kresmoy continues. A letter plastered in stamps. Care of the weapon. In flight. To you. Yes, you, Guardian. This line is about a message sent to the Guardian weapon. It's unclear if this is 3's message, Orin's message, or another forthcoming message. If it's a future message, it could be a letter that prompts the Guardian to find and kill the conductor. It also could be 3's message coming true, prompting extinction. Next, 5 tries to intervene and stop the emissary. Cease. The grains slip. Formless. Smoke through your metacarpals. Nuclei through your atomic cloud. Screaming, you seize the last thread. There, in that lightless abyss. No, a whale carcass. Picked over by Malacotrakans. No! Full fathom 5. Thy father lies. An evolutionary explosion. No! 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 Dying to barren bone. Orin sees a dead whale in an abyss of darkness, picked apart by scavengers. Something or someone is dying and decaying. Someone Orin doesn't want to die. Possibly 3 or another member of the 9. Full fathom 5, thy father lies is probably the most cryptic line in the whole prophecy. If we interpret it literally, Orin could be comprehending what's happening, then speaking to 5, who just tried to intervene, and telling 5 that their father is lying. The only logical father for 5 would be the sun, or a new character that set in motion events that created the 9. If it's the sun, lying would likely mean the sun has exhausted its fuel and is about to expand into a red giant, swallowing the inner planets. After exhausting all of its fusion fuel, it would then explode into a planetary nebula, destroying all life and soul, including the 9. Eventually, the nebula would dissipate into a white dwarf that would slowly burn out. Evolutionary in that context would be referencing the evolution of the stellar life cycle of the sun, reaching its end. Even when destiny takes place, the red giant phase should be 5 billion years away. Perhaps the 9 or the alchemist, Maya Sundaresh, do something that poisons the core of soul, perhaps killing 9, causing it to happen early, creating a similar effect to 3's death upon Earth. Given the alchemical connection between gold and the sun, this could be Maya trying to bring about the Golden Age. This would be an apocalypse to rule all apocalypses for soul. It's unlikely that any life could survive it. This is likely the extinction event caused by the death of 3. The apocalypse could be that the conductor successfully reverts time to the Golden Age, and everyone currently alive dies as a result, but it's probably more likely that she tries again and fails, and that failure causes the extinction. I favor the sun-going nebula explanation a lot, it just makes the most sense. Having witnessed the apocalypse, Orin resolves to warn humanity. You drag yourself back together, your sulfur hexafluoride howl, dying in the vacuum of space. You have to warn them. This is why Orin breaks free from the 9. She needs to send a warning to humanity about their impending extinction. This goal is aligned with 3's conspiracy in the Edge of Fate, allowing the message to be transmitted to Ikora and the weapon. I think Orin has seen what is to come during her time as emissary, and now needs to remember what was forgotten to help the weapon avert extinction. As 3 says, strike true, weapon. The Guardian is the key to averting extinction. The Inners seem to think that we will be able to change fate and save Soul from extinction, so the message is clear. Failure is not an option. The 9 and the people of Soul, the people of the last city, need their weapon to do what they've done so many times before. Change fate and save the universe. Orin just needs to unlock her knowledge to save us all. The language bind the 9 is very similar to the language that the 9 use to refer to their connection to matter life. Thus, I conclude that bind the 9 means to permanently ensure they are connected to matter life. This could be connected to the Inner's desire for bodies of matter. The Outers want to escape their binds, bringing extinction to Soul's life, and are willing to kill Inners for this goal. A fated extinction prophesized by both 3 and Orin is coming. What the cause ultimately will be is unclear. The 9 are playing at fate, the Inners with humanity and the Outers against us. Will this divide be Soul's undoing, or will it save us from destruction? Can the inhabitants of Soul steal fate from the gods and create their own destiny, or are they tied to a predetermined outcome? There are many questions as this game is far from over. It will be the chess match of a lifetime, and as Drifter says,
we're in it as pawns.
Like Ikora, I believe that we have free will. Even if free will is an illusion, I don't think it makes sense to operate as if you are bound to fate. If you consign yourself to a fatalistic outcome, the choices you make have no impact upon your future, so it's logical to give up and not try to do anything. To me, that's a very depressing way to live your life, not having control over anything that happens to you. You would become a passenger in your own life. I have to hold on to hope that my actions do have the potential to meaningfully change fate in order to maintain the motivation to work towards a better outcome and have hope for the future. Textually, I also think Destiny's narrative aligns with this idea, given the ethos of hope created by the Traveler, and how central the theme of making your own fate is to the plot of the Light and Darkness saga and Defeat of the Witness. It would be deflating for the Fate saga to turn around and upend this theme completely, invalidating the previous 10 years of Destiny. That's why I believe that we will make our own fate, defy the Nine's conspiracies and prophecies, and change the destiny of Soul once again, saving everyone from extinction. We may begin the Fate saga as pawns, but I think by the end we will become the Grandmasters, wielding our own conspiracy, playing the pieces of Soul to create the endgame we desire. As one says, should we desire more, we must dare to take it. This video was funded in part by my channel members. If you want to support the channel helping fund the creation of future videos, and gain access to perks like exclusive bonus videos and your name in the credits, you can click the join button to become a member. Thank you to everyone for watching.
If I could choose just one day and live it all over again, I'd go back to the start when you stole my heart and love rushed in. But I know it's far too late, 'cause I'm stuck right here